Welcome everyone to our discussion of Sefer Darkei Gemara by Rabbi Yitzchak Konfenton. In this siman, he's going to be talking about diyukim, how to make inferences. It'll fit very nicely into our discussion also that we just had in Sefer Yigayel. He says like this in Siman Zion. Le'olam keshitidayek eza diyuk. Whenever you make diyukim inferences, me'eza mishnah or brisa or shum mama, from a mishnah brisa or from any mama, which is probably mama Marayim. Remember, he's a Rishon. Ein re'ui lecha ledayek also diyuk mina ketza ela ketza. Don't make the inference from one extreme to the next. Ki'im yesh emse'i b'neihem tikach emse'i. Because if there's a middle ground, so then you should make the diuk from to the middle case. Very interesting that we were just discussing opposites. Here it is. Derech mashal. Im yomru lecha. If someone says to you, Ruvain eino chacham. Okay, you say Ruvain is not a chacham. So lo tidayek about who sechel, that he's a fool. Why? Ki efshe she'eino lo chacham v'lo sechel about who meinoni. Maybe he's not wise and maybe he's not foolish. He's just a normal person. Right. Okay, so that's what he says. Don't jump to the opposite extreme if there's a mean case there. Aval v'she'ein b'neihem emse'i. But if we're talking about a certain case, like we said, pregnant, non-pregnant, so then az telech min haketza ela ketza. So then the diuk should be the affirmation of one is the denial of the other, or the denial of one is the affirmation of the other. Derech mashal. Im yomru lecha. If someone says to you, ata eino laila, if he says to you, it's not night, so then you can properly medayek, hine tedayek about yom, it must be day. Because there's no middle position. Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Okay. Now.
So that's a negative.
Of course, that's just, yes.
Right.
And you have to be careful about the mim'atzim, that there's no middle point there.
Right.
Okay. Now, ukasher tireh. Now here's his application, which is so important to the Gemara. Ukasher tireh. Ki ha-mishnah o brisa lekach ha-ketza harishon v'nosan lo dinma. When you see that a mishnah or a brisa gives you the din in one extreme, one polar opposite, okay, v'achar kach likach ha-ketza achron, then it goes to the other extreme, v'nosan V'nasa alav din acher, and then all of a sudden the opposite extreme, it gives a different din. V'hine haniach emse'i lo diber bo klal, and it leaves the middle case, and it doesn't explain to you the law of the middle case. Az tochel ahakshos v'loma, then it is proper to ask the following question: Ha gufa kasha or kasha resha aseifa. Then you should have a problem. It gives you the din in one extreme, and it gives you a din in the opposite extreme. Then the middle case is going to be contradictory. We're going to spell it out in the middle in a minute. Ki midiyuk reisha nira she'emse'i ein lo oso adin. From the ratio, let's say it was chayev, so the emse'i shouldn't have that din. And the diuk from the sefer should be the opposite. Since it doesn't have the din in the sefer, it should have the din in the middle case. V'hatam, we're going to bring this to the live case. V'hatam hu, the iloto mahachi, if you don't say that, ella she haketza v'emse'i dinim shabbat, but you do say that the extreme in the middle case has the same din, so then we should say lisnei emse'i v'ana amina because shekain haketza yesh lo also din. So then the Mishnah should have told me the middle case, and I would have known kol shekain the extreme. Va'az outside of hechrach Here tertzu. So when this happens, the Gemara has to say, Reisha dafka v'sefer k'tei nispa. The Reisha is dafka, and the sefer which is said derech hagav, o gam kein chada minei nakat, or one of the two you should choose. Okay, let's do that in reality. Okay, I'll show you the case. He already brought it.
Yeah, this happens all the time. Very, very common.
Remember our famous case? Our famous case he brought, right? Taravan, Kesad Bekesiv. How does a woman get married with money?
Yeah.
Bekesiv. So it said, Nosan lo kesiv, and there's a price, Nosan lo kesiv o shavik kesiv, v'oma lo haryat mekdeshetli, haryat meresetli, haryat lili into. He gives her money, or the equivalent of money, and he says to her, one of these three formulas, you're married to me, engaged, or you'll be my wife. Then it is marriage. Aval, he shenosna v'amrahi, but the other extreme, if she gives and she says, with the formula Haryat Mikdeshli, Haryat Meresli, Haryat Lili Into, then it's Eino Mikdeshet. Okay? So here's my little chart I made. Okay? The first case is brought. Nosen hu v'omar hu. Right? The din was Mikdeshet. So he says when you see that a Mishnah or a Brisa brings one extreme, what's the extreme? He does both the pool both of giving and saying and gives the din, Mikudeshet, then runs to the opposite extreme where she says and she gives and tells you it's Eino Mikudeshet. It doesn't give us the middle cases. What happens if he says and if he gives and she says, or she gives and
he says?
Those cases are not stated. Now what's worse about these cases not being stated, he says, is that the law here is going to end up to be a contradiction if we medayek from the Reisha. This law here in this case, let's say case number 2, the diuk should be Mikudeshet, correct, from the Reisha?
Right.
But from the Sefer, it should be Mikudeshes.
Right.
Because it's only in the Mikudeshes from when she does both activities.
Right.
And that's for Gufa what Rev Papa asks. Okay? He says exactly that. He says, Tamid Nasan Omahu or Nasan Huba Abrahi, Eno Mikudeshet from the Reisha. When he gives and she says it's Eno Mikudeshet. And from the Sefer, he Shenasna Lava Amrahi, Lo Havi Kedushin. Time and Nasa Hiva Amrahi, Nasam Huva Amrahi, Have Kedushin. So from the Reisha, it should turn out that second case should be Mikudeshet. And lo and behold, the Gemara says, Reisha Dafka Sefer K'dei Nispa. And it has a kasha. In other words, Reisha, let's medayek from the Reisha, and the Sefer was just derech hagav. And it says, V'tani Sefer Mitzvah Reisha, they doesn't like it because in this Reisha and Sefer are contradictory. Ella Naslan Hugomen, there's the middle case that says it's a suffix Mikudeshet. Okay, that's
so I guess the Gemara assumes right. Assumes that it's the case of Nasan Huva Amrahi and Nasan Hiva and Amrahu are similar enough to ask a kasha, even though they are different cases.
But I don't understand what that means.
No, Nasan Huva Amrahi. Right, so Nasan Huva Amrahi, we're medayek that it's not Mikudeshes, which is
from the
Reisha, and we're medayek that Nasan Hiva Amrahu is Mikudeshes. And those two cases of Nasan Huva Amrahi and Nasan Hiva and Amrahu are a kasha if they're different.
Hold on, this is the case. This is the case that is going to be contradictory, first of all. This great case.
Oh, it's not.
This is what they asked on. It's not this. Not three.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This case, Nasan Huva Amrahi, if only when he does both is it Mikudeshet. If he does less than both, in case number 2, then should be Eno Mikudeshet.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemara again. Come back to Maskar Rav Abba. Time of the Nasan Huva Amar. I can't see. Okay, there we go. Time of the Nasan Huva Amar Hu. Hanasan Huva Amar Hi. Mukadashas Amar Sefa. Abel Hishan Nasan. Time of the Nasan Hu. Abel Nas. Time of the Nasan Huva Amar Hi. Hanasan Hu. Oh, it's the same case. Okay, I didn't realize that. Okay.
It's the same
Got
case.
it. Okay.
It's the same case. Now, however, it was very interesting. You see, I always love to make this chart. This chart was all the time, right? The problem is, why did the Gemara bring up this case?
Okay, that's what confused me, because you put that case there.
Exactly. The reason I put it there was because I wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
The reason why I grayed out number 2 is that's the
case. Right. That's the contradiction. That makes sense. Right. Absolutely.
But the possibility exists of the third case. Now, why did the Gemara say that third case? Okay. So now I think in here, let's see, Reish Dafka Nisba, and it doesn't like that answer. You see, you don't, by saying the Reish is Dafka, that's the one we make a diuk on, right? And the Sefer was just brought there, Chagav, is not a very good answer. We might have to say it, but it's not a good answer, because there's no, that's saying that there's no real reason to say it. Because really we could medayik everything from the ratio, right? Once I know that Nasanu v'Omrahu is Mekudeshet, then 2, 3, and 4 are all Vadayim Mekudeshet, correct? You with me?
Yes, yeah.
If I'm learning Dafka, Nasanu v'Omrahu is Mekudeshet,
then anything else is not.
Nasan, all of the other 3 Vadayim, what culture came Nasanu v'Omrahu. So to say that this case is just, the Nisba is a little bit dochek. I mean, it's a lot dochek. We don't like it. The Gemara rejects it. Okay, let's look at how the Gemara rejects it here. It says, "Vatana Sefer Milta the Sasa Laresha." Could it be that the Bryce here is learning the Sefer, the diuk actually from the Sefer, which is going to be a steer to the Resha? Ela Hachikama Nasanhu v'Amrahu Peshita Dahavu Mikudeshet. Nasanhu v'Omrahi Nase Kamisha Nasnahi v'Omrahi V'lo Havi Kedushin. Let's read that again. Nasanhu v'Omrahu, they want to say it's Peshita, it's marriage. When he does both, right?
Right.
When he gives, and she says, that is like somewhat kami shenasnahi v'omrahi. That's like the last case. V'lo havi kedushin. It's a little bit strange, but this is what it says. It says here, nasan hu this case of nasan hu v'omrahi is like 4. That's what it's saying. Because it's in a Mikdeshet. In other words, they're putting in those words in the Havana of the Mishnah. It's saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's saying Nasan Hu v'Omer was Mikdeshet, and this case of Nasan Hu v'Omer is like the last case. In other words, the reason why we wrote this last case of Nasan Hu v'Omer was to tell you that this case, the middle case, is like it. So the Gemara doesn't. That's a little bit better because it gives some reason to have the last case. The reason why we wrote the last case is to tell you the MCE is like the last case. Okay, a little doche, but at least we gave a reason. We just didn't say Kedei Nisba just by the way, but no reason. We said it had to be there to tell you that the middles are like the ends. Okay, fine. But here's the other Iboy Sema, which makes, although the din changes in this one, it does make a little better reading. Iboy Sema, Nasanhu v'Omrahu Mikudeshet, Nasnahi v'Omrahu, Nasnahi v'Omrahi Zaina Mikudeshet, that's the extreme, that's case number 4. Nasanhu v'Omrahi Sveikahi v'Chashinim Midirabana. It's Safek Mikudeshes, and therefore we say Chashinim Midirabana, it's us. She would have to get a get or something like that. Okay, this is an interesting Gemara. We have to think about it. But what it's saying here is that the problem is why isn't the case? Why isn't the middle case taught? That's the question here. And what's worse is if the cases that are taught, the two yellows here, are going to end up with a different din in this gray case. Okay, so and what he says is the whole basis of this is if really this din here, number 2, is also mikudeshet, so then that should have been written. It's a bigger chiddush. Because if Nasan Hu Omer he is mikudeshet, so then certainly Nasan Hu Omer Hu is mikudeshet. So that's why we're medayek. This must be Eno mikudeshet. Are you with me on that one?
Yeah.
I know it's going. Okay, that's what he says. Okay, but this is the famous box of 4, which always exists. Many Gemaras, box of 4, and you always have to write them out, and then you have to fill in the dinner. And then when you do that, you ask yourself that question here, which is not the subject of what about Nas Nehiva Omer Hu? How come that wasn't even brought up? It didn't have to be. But that's another question to ponder, to think about. I'm sure that people will talk about it. Anyway, that's what he says. Let's go back to our case. Where are we? Okay, we're in Siman Zion. Okay, that's what he says here. Le'olam, k'shetigai case diuk me'eza mishnah brayso, o shum marmar, en rui lecha ledayek, also din min ketza ela ketza, ki im yesh emse'i b'neim tikach emse'i, derech mashal. Im yom lecha ruvein eno chacham, lo tidayek aval hu sechel. Don't say he's a fool. Ki efshe she'eno chacham eno sechel aval hu benoni. Okay. Aval b'she'en b'nei emse'i, so then, of course, you go from one extreme to the other. Az teilech miketza ketza derech mashal. If it says hata eno laila, so you know that you can medarek that it is day. Now, here's what we just discussed. Kasher tireh ki ha-mishnah ha-braisa lakach ketzer rishon v'nasan bo din ma. It tells you if he does both the giving and the saying, then it's mikudeshet. V'achar kach lokach ha-ketzer achron v'nosei alav din acher. And then it says if she does both. If she does both activities, it's ain't only mikudeshet, right? V'haniach emse'i lo didebel klal. It leaves the middle case and doesn't speak about it. So then, az tachol hakshel flama or gufa kasha, or kasha resha sefer. By leaving the middle case out and by giving opposite dinim in the resh and the sefer, it's going to come out that middle case will be medayek two dinim, two opposite dinim. When he does both the giving and the saying, it's mikudeshet. But if he gives and she says, it's ain't mikudeshet. From the Reisha, no, only when she does both giving and saying, it's ain't mikudeshet. But if he gives and she says, it is mikudeshet. So whenever they leave that middle case out, you always have to say, wait a minute, that middle case is contradictory. Kimediyuk Reisha nira she'emse'i ein lo din. Right? And that's why we said when he does both, it's mikudeshet, but only one shouldn't be mikudeshet. And from the diuk of the sefer, near the hefech, it should be mikudeshet in the case. Now he explains. V'tamhu, why is this correct? The ilote mahacha ella sheketzev emsidinim should say that the extreme and the middle have the same din. So then, nidle emse'i v'anamina ki mikol shekena ketzer yeshlo osa din. You have to make that deal that if he says and gives, it's mikudeshet. if he gives and she says it's ain't no mikudeshet. Because if it was true that the middle case was also mikudeshet, then it should have said the middle case, and I would have said kol shekain the extreme case. So that's why he proves that that you must make the deal from the ratio, that the opposite din should be in the middle case. Va'az outside a hechrach yitetzu. So whenever the situation happens, the Gemara is forced to say reisha dafka sefer k'tei nispa. Okay, which it did say. The ratio is the one you're medayek from, and the sefer is only derech hagav. Ogam kain chada minayhu nakat, or it only took one of the two possibilities. It didn't do all four. I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Well, what he means to say is the the Mishnah could have just as well said the emsai, and it just decided to take the
extreme.
The extreme.
Okay, and both will admit that these are dochek, and you see that our Gemara in Kedushin gave a third possibility, and it gave a reason why. It tried to give better reasons instead of just saying lav dafka. This is basically saying lav dafka. Don't be medayek on the sefer. That's what it's saying. But the Gemara didn't like that so much and tried to give other alternatives of why the middle case was not there. And sometimes those first two alternatives were just linguistic, and it didn't affect the din. In other words, the din really we medayek from the ratio that the only time he's nekudesh is when he says both. All the other cases are not so. But the last answer was very interesting, because there it said that it's true the first case is mikudeshet, but the extreme is eno mikudeshet. But the middle cases are eno mikudeshet midaraisa, but are b'derabbanan chashina as a safek mikudeshet. However, so she's safek mikudeshet, she'll need to get midarabanan, which was a very interesting answer. Okay, he didn't bring it, but. It was interesting what the Gemara did. The Gemara doesn't like to give these types of answers. They're forced, as he says, to give it, to say lav dafka, but they don't like to. Now, also, you have to know that these lav dafkas are not just wild answers, because there's another agenda in the Mishnah, and that's to be memorized. And a lot of times, things flow in the mind or remembered easily by talking about the extremes. So like we said, even with the Shorbor, Mav, and Hever, those are not any logical order. One of the Rishonim says Shor rhymes with Bor and Mav rhymes with Hever. Okay?
To make it easier to remember, right?
Make it easy to remember. So there is a valid reason to say Reisha Dafka and Sefer K'tei Nispa. Because there's another scenario called memorizing. When you do memorize, there's another. Okay, I guess there is an importance to also learning Mishnayos and memorizing it. You do get a lot out of it. You really do. I mean, it shouldn't be the only thing that a person does, memorization and saying over. That's true, but there is a lot that you do get out of it. This type of subtlety of how things flow and the connection of ideas does really come from learning Mishnayos. I love that. I'm doing that. I'd love to not only learn the Mishnayos. I mean, Balpeh, I don't do Balpeh too well, but what I do is I do write them all out, and I do see how they flow one to the other logically, and how it's very easy the Tana really made it very easy to remember these classical cases. Okay, as said, I just wanted to bring out, it's just not wild, K'dei Nispa, Lav Dafka. There's another agenda happening. That's what I wanted to add. Okay, v'zeh diuk asher yom rutz lama emsi. Now this diuk that we're making from the extremes to the middle, tochel asos came kasher lo yu hadinim kiyuv v'shlili o isa v'heter. Ukeshe'ein behem machlokas tanayim v'omorayim. Aval. Yesh echad me'elu lo tochal. But if there's one of these three conditions, so then you are not allowed to make this diuk. Ki ken Yomer lecha kol chatera adif o lehodia kocho shel raploni. Kamosh kadim lecha perisho. Let's think about what he's saying here. Okay? So first of all, he's saying he just finished saying that you can make a diuk that if, from one extreme to the middle. In other words, if the extreme case of he gives and he says is mikudeshet, then any of the cases in between, like he's saying one or giving one, and she doing the other activity, says eno mikudeshet. So that's a valid diuk. Okay? וזה דיוק אשר יאמרו האמצעי תוכל לעשות כאשר לא היו הדינים חיוב ושלילי. And what does that mean? או איסה והתר, או כאשר אין בהם מחלוקת תנאים אמריים. Okay, the last case I understand because we did it. If there's a machlokas between Amarayim and Tanayim, so then you can't medayik to the middle case. If they're arguing in one case, so you can't take, and you cannot say, what about the case in between? And that we did the last time too. We'll go over that. But what does it mean that you can't medayik when one case is chayiv and one case is sholel, or us certain head? This is the same problem I come to all the second time in this book. I remember we discussed it once before. Okay? It eludes me, I'll tell you. The last piece I understand because we did that before. Remember when we did it?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find it. Okay? We did that because Lodi Kolko the we explained that case, okay? Because that I can understand. Okay, I'm going to skip it if you don't mind.
Okay.
We can come back to it. Okay, but
take some thought.
This is the second time in the book. I discussed it once with David, but I don't have it close. Okay. All right. Let's go to the Siman Ches. So that was all in the Yukim, okay? And he warned us of as we just learned in Higayon, you can only make the Yukim if things are polar opposites. But if they're not polar opposites, you have to be careful because the middle cases can be problematic if both extremes are stated. If, of course, only one case was stated, like he gave and he said, so then we couldn't make the Yukim properly, but everything else was not. Okay, but here, since the opposite extreme was also stated with the opposite din, so then we ended up with a contradiction in the middle. Okay, very good. Siman Ches. Leolam keshitiyayin b'shum drush or b'shum inyan, כשם שתשים מגמס פניך להבין היטב לשון העניין ההוא, יש לך גם כן לבקש דרכם להקשוס כנגדו, ולהניע תחילה הספקת שיש בעניין ההוא או בלשון ההוא, ולדס הטעוס והקושיות שאפשר לעשות בדרוש ההוא. Okay, we're going to take this slow. This is very beautiful. He says, just like you're supposed to focus your attention to understand the language and the content, what's being said, you also have to ask kashas about what's being said. And stir up, the word lahaniya means to stir up all the doubts that can exist in this subject matter or lashon. Remember, those are the two keys that we see a lot in the Seif. Also, we see it in the Ramchal's work. We have to make a distinction between language and content. Okay? The language is the lashon is the physical words that are used. The content is what we're talking about. Oh, so, for instance, in our Ava Avos Nezika, there's certain language problems there, like what is Mava? Okay? That's a language problem. But there's content problems, like why does the Torah have to say 4 types of Nezikin? Okay, just learn one and I'll learn the other. That's a content problem. That's not a language problem. So he says, whenever you're learning, the first thing you have to do, of course, is understand what's the language, what's being said, and what is the meaning of the language. What content is it describing? But he says the second thing you have to do is to be pugnacious. You have to ask kashas. This is not just asking kashas to be difficult. This is an etzem part of learning. If you don't ask the kasha, you'll never get to the truth of what's being said, because the way things are written in a way that you're supposed to ask the kasha and then come to the resolution. Remember that Torah Shabbat Peh was not supposed to be written down. And so when it was written down, it was written down in a way that retains the Torah Shabbat Peh. And the key to that is kashas. The key to that is kashas. By recognizing it was written in a certain way, wait a minute, why did it say mother? Why did it say Heather? Why did you say Aish and man? Okay? By realizing that there's a Shinui Lashon, or a Shinui In, or a Shinui Din, those are flags that are embedded in the text to get you involved in the true meaning of what's being said. It's a gigantic chiddush. A lot of people just read, and they don't understand that stage 1 is reading. Stage 2 is understanding what you're reading through seeing flags, which are difficulties in the text, which are signposts that were implanted there for you to understand, and for us to understand the deeper meaning. This is what I call the mysticism of form, that the writing was done in such a way that it forces the reader, if he's only if he really dedicates himself, will he really uncover the true meaning of the text, and not just the basic meaning. It was amazing today. On Shabbos, of course, I sit in the same place. Somehow, Derek Tfunos, an old version, not Derek Tfunos, Starkey Gemara, an old version was on my desk. I don't know how it got there. It's not, and I've never seen it in the Beit Knesset before either. But there it was, and in the back of that version was a letter of the Chazon Ish on how to learn. And his first, I should really send it over to you. His first rule is people make the mistake of reading the Gemara like an ageris, like a letter. Right. And they don't understand that it's written with precise dictum. And that's the beginning. And that's why people, and he talks about shitchiyas. He talks about reading things in a Bekiyas level. He says the whole Milchama really is to get out of the shitchiyas level, the surface level of understanding, and to push yourself into the Iman. And that's very, very difficult because he explains all that. I mean, it's amazing. I'll have to send it over to you. He says, well, people by nature are lazy. I mean, they just like to just read. It's not only that. There's over 3,000 pages of Gemara. I mean, it's not only laziness. There's a tremendous amount of information there. But the most important thing is that the beauty of learning comes through this difficult lashon. Right. And here is another. It's not only to be medayek. It's to realize that embedded in the language are kashas that you must ask. If you don't ask them, you will not get to the real depth of what's being said. And that's what he says over here. Just like you have to put your efforts to understanding clearly what the language is saying and the content of those words, you also have to gear yourself up to ask kashas, but not just wild kashas, but to carefully analyze what's being said and to realize that there's flags here, there's difficulties here that are purposely put into the text that you must see and must then answer with the true meaning of the text. And that's what he says here. Oops, I'm sorry, just repeat that, I know why that. Okay. You must also ask kashas about what's being said. And first bring up any of the questions that you have in the content or in the language. Like we said, why are there 4 avos? Why does it say mother? Uledas hataos, I think this extra tough is just my error. Hataos v'hakushio she'efsha la'asot b'drashahu. And you have to know mistakes and difficulties that are possible in this explanation. Why? Ki ze yesiba lahamidecha hagara emes. Wow. This will be the cause to have you see the real truth. Ulahavin ha'inyan al-buro. And to understand the subject matter clearly. Ki mi shemargish hachole miyad yemotze refualo. That's his little beat to it. A person who sees the sickness will then understand the medicine that's needed to fix it. Interesting. Okay. I was trying to explain to my granddaughter also, who likes to cry. I mean, she's, 5. I mean, kids always cry. I tried to explain this to her, that we have this thing called verbalization. I was kidding with her, but just to get her this idea that you have to verbalize what's bothering you. Because if you verbalize what's bothering you, then someone can actually help you with the right solution.
Right.
But if you just cry, then no one knows what's happening.
Right.
So that's what I tried to explain to her. It worked a little, but, what can I do? I've tried to be logical with people that didn't quite get it yet, but it does help.
Then they could. I mean, I have discussions with my 3-year-old or 3.5-year-old, and you see there's a certain amount of logic that they understand.
Exactly. And it's very helpful because, there is a stage where Baruch Hashem puts the ability to talk. And that means that a person can now express himself clearly. And then the other person can then respond properly to that. That's a growth, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Okay, when I always go to a doctor, I hate to go to them, but I always have to write down what they say. Because your emotions cloud your logic, so you always have to, exactly what are you saying and because the doctor can only respond to, okay, he also has independent tests, Baruch Hashem, because he can't rely on necessarily what you're saying, but
right.
It's very important to magdir these things. But here he says, in learning, you must look for the problems, because when you look for the problems, then all of a sudden you'll discover the solutions.
Right.
That's what he says. V'yesh lecha lahazir shelo lekabel hagdama o inyan b'techilas ha'inyan b'mushlam. He says, be very careful not to accept premises or the content, the subject matter in its entirety. Ad shetachkor v'techapes alav. Until you do proper investigation. Just don't accept things wholesale. Why? And he quotes Mishlei, Pesi Yamin L'Kol Davar. It's a fool that believes in everything. You would think, wait a minute, a fool, that was people talking in the street, but not learning the Mishnah, not learning the Torah. Excuse me. He says, no. He says, don't be a fool. These things are written in a very precise way, and they're written in a way that you need to be intelligent. An intelligent reader has to be involved. So don't leave your mind outside the base midrash. Bring in your critical analysis, and through the critical analysis, then you'll be really able to understand what the text says. says. And he says, so don't accept things wholesale. Ask yourself, why did it say it? Is it true? What would be the opposite?
So that's what you're saying, Hakdamis means like wholesale, like don't accept it just in a...
Because it's said.
Right.
Someone said it, so he said it. Why did he say it? What's the source that he said it? Could he have said the opposite? Is there another possibility?
It's a lesson in life.
It really is. Really is. I have a friend who asked Rabbi Brody, the Olga Shalom used to do a shiur. Chevron, how does he give a shiur? I said it a few times. So he said, what I do is, I see what Tosfos says. I figure out another good alternative, and then I show why Tosfos' alternative is better than mine. That's what he says. But the point is you're supposed to be an active thinker in Gemara, not just reading and parroting information. Also, you're not supposed to just, be wild. You have to be educated on how to ask good kasha. That's why we're learning these books. What's called a logical kasha and what's called emotionality. Rabbi Goldstein used to say, oh, I understand it. You want attention. In other words, you're not really asking a kasha. You just want someone to say that you're alive, to help you from falling asleep. Okay, that's okay. So we'll give you a little pinch on the cheek. But okay, that's the point of learning these books, is that you are sensitive to what's called a good kasha, what's called something that's reasonable. Okay, and this kafon and extra lush, and these are all reasons to raise your hand and say, but wait a minute, we learned that already. You see, and then by having these books, consciously that you're saying something that's really rational. Instead of sometimes naturally you come to nature, you say it. There's no doubt about it. But sometimes you miss things, or sometimes you say things which are not necessarily logical. So that's why we're studying this book. But here he says, don't accept things wholesale. Just don't say things over and say, well, I understand it because he said it and I can repeat it. It's not a question of repeating here. This is an active, he says, only a fool accepts everything. Everything has to be analyzed. Okay? As you said, a lesson in life. This is called circular reasoning. Don't explain something with circular reasoning. The hekesh saviv means that you're using the same premise to explain what you're trying to explain. O ne'elam b'ne'elam acher kamohu, or you're using a text which is unknown, it's not clear, to explain what you're saying. There's no source for that text. Well, I'm asking for the source. Now you're giving me a source that doesn't have a source, doesn't do anything for me. Oh, nigla b'nigla. Okay, of course, don't also, if something is obvious, don't explain it with something else that's obvious. That's mutar. Ki habir hanachon eino ra bir hanelam b'nigla. You're always supposed to explain something which is hidden, unknown, with a known. Okay, that's what you're supposed to be doing. If you see the Gemara, you also have to check it out. The goal should be that the case that you're talking about is unknown, and you're bringing a proof which is known to the unknown. That's the proper way. But you can't bring an unknown to an unknown, which is ridiculous. I mean, because you're not doing anything, or something that's obvious to something else that's obvious, because the first thing you need proof because it was obvious. Okay, whenever you see these things, you raise your hand, you say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Okay. Hiderech nosim v'notnim rotzlama amarayim. Remember these Rishonim. The Rishonim tell us the way that people debate amarayim. Hak shows neged eza mishnah, o eza brisa, o mamar ma, when they want to ask a kasha against a mishnah, brisa, or a mamar of a contemporary, uladas imhu tzodek olav, to know if it's right or wrong. You see, that's how they determine whether it's correct or not, by asking kashas. Also, hamamra asher alav anu danan yikachu also l'mesupach. The case that we're dealing with on the floor is considered as doubtful. V'kol shah hamamrim asher michutz yikablu lemitam. And all the outside cases are considered as true. Ulahak shos negdo. So in other words, I have the case and law in front of me. Now what I do is I say, I don't know if this law is correct or incorrect. The way I do it is by bringing other cases external to the case I'm talking with and then comparing. I say, well, wait a minute. This, what we're saying here, does not seem to be correct because of some other case that's external, which has already been stated. So what we do is the case on the floor is what we're dealing with. That's called Masupas. We don't know if it's true or not. We'll ask kashas to it. The way we ask kashas to it is by presuming that all the other statements are correct and by saying that this correct statement external to our statement is a contradiction to our statement. That's what he says. The statement we're talking about is considered doubtful. All the other statements, all the other mishnayos, then we say they're true, and we use them as kashas. Then what do? Then we go back to those questions, those statements which we held were true. So then what we do, then we do the opposite. We say now we understand what our statement is, but now we go back to those other external sources and we say maybe they're incorrect. From what we understood now on our page, it'll have repercussions, hashlochot, it'll have repercussions back to the other cases. O mama acher shehu yedua shehu emet. Or we ask them another case which we know is true. All this whole process is in order to clarify what the truth is over here. Why? Because we take everything as a suffix, so then there's nothing we could do. So look at this.
If everything is a suffix, just throw your hands up in the air and say, forget it. You can't. There's nowhere to start from. So what he's saying is
exactly. There's no starting point.
Right.
But this is very interesting. I mean, this is something that has to be thought about. But is
this what he's saying the Gemara is doing itself? That when Ravina Rav Ashi wrote down the Gemara, this is what they did. They took each statement and they said, okay, now let's analyze it as if it's a suffix, and we'll deal with the other statements elsewhere.
Yes, that's what he's saying. He's saying what they did was they took a statement on the floor and they said, I don't know if it's true or not.
Right.
Let's check it out.
Right.
So then they brought all mishras and brises against the statement.
Right.
Okay? As if all those mishras and brises are
100% true. And then those mishras and brises we'll deal with elsewhere, wherever that is. Maybe here, maybe
then after they impact on the statement we're dealing with, and they defined exactly the statement we're dealing with, right? So now we've clarified our statement in front of us on the floor, right? And we say, okay, this is what the statement means. Now we go back and shoot this statement to either the original statements or all the other statements and see if they fit.
Right.
Okay? In other words, that's called hashlachot. In other words, you have to be it's a Kabbalistic thing he's saying here. You have to start somewhere. So you start by saying what's on the floor, we don't know what it is, if it's true or not. But we presume that everything external to it is true. Then we decide what's the getter of our statement by that analysis, right? We say this statement means X, Y, and Z because that will make it fit into all the other statements, okay? Now, once we've defined this statement, we just don't leave it there. We say, does this now new definition that we have of our present statement have its hashlachot on either the other statements that were said that we thought were true or not? Okay? It's a dynamic.
Right.
The Baltic dynamic. Wow.
Right.
Okay. So we'll
stop here.
We'll stop here. Okay. This is phenomenal. Wonderful. I'm very happy that we're doing it, and I say all the time, everyone should read it. The book is 39 pages long. Can you believe it? It was on my desk.
Yeah.
The book. There's a little pamphlet. It's not even doesn't have a hardcover. It's 39 half pages, almost like half pages, even quarter pages big. And it's just filled with, and no one understands it. I mean, no one understands. People read it, but whew, this is filled with essential knowledge of how to learn.
Right.
We're going to change the world just by bringing the safe out.
We should. I mean,
it
really gives you a good framework. And today, I mean, I don't know. I don't. They try, but a lot of the framework that people give are just from their own. You have some bright people that sat down on their own and tried to put a framework together for the younger kids and high school kids, but here it's all worked out for you, so why start from scratch and recreate the wheel?
Right. Okay, so next week is going to be working for Pesach, right?
Yeah, next week will be Pesach.
We'll take a break,
and then we can continue Matzah Shabbos Chalamayim. That's
fantastic. So have a Chag Kosher B'Sameach.
You too.
Enjoy the cleaning. It's a big tikkun.
It is. I mean. I don't know. With the way the world is going, I'm expecting Mashiach to come, any moment.
Yeah,
it's just there's so much movement going on.
If Mashiach came today, we would not have any question why now. That's definitely true.
Right.
You know what I mean? The whole sage is set. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, if Mashiach doesn't come, and maybe if he does come, I guess we'll still be learning, right?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I don't know if we'll be learning the same way, because there'll be a lot more clarity. We'll go back, to the times where everything will just be halacha psuka.
Yeah, but there has to be iyun. I mean, we'll have to ask the Mashiach some questions, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Can't just, even Moshe Rabbeinu, they ask a question. Moshe Rabbeinu asks a question. It can't be. A Jew has to ask questions.
Right, that's right.
Because words cannot. I definitely, also because words are crystallization of ideas, but when you start spelling them out in all their pratim, then you have questions. There's no such thing as if you had all the pens and all the things they said, you just couldn't write everything down. You can't.
Right.
It first of all be miyutar, but second of all be impossible. Now we could pick up a book like that. So even if Mashiach comes, we'll be asking him questions, how to do we're doing menachas now. I have all sorts of interesting questions we'll have to solve. It'll be a wonderful shiur. Okay, we should be zocher to it. We won't see you next week, but Hashem week after.
Okay, very good.
Too.
Take care. Have a good one. Okay, goodbye.
Good luck.